Commander Alan Burke stood at the viewport of his small scout ship, the Sparrow. His face showed no emotion as he watched the diplomatic vessel Olive Branch explode into fragments of metal and fire. There had been 37 people on board. Good people. People who had believed in peace. "Recording complete, sir," said Lieutenant Kelly Adams, her voice quiet with shock. "All data secured." Alan nodded without turning. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed." The Vraxian warship that had destroyed the Olive Branch didn't even bother to scan for survivors. Why would they? In the eyes of the galactic hegemony, humans were barely more evolved than the animals on their planet. Not worth talking to, not worth saving, and definitely not worth respecting. 3 days earlier, humanity had celebrated. After years of sending signals into space, someone had finally answered. The hegemony had sent a message. They would meet with humans. Earth had sent its best and brightest. Scientists, linguists, diplomats, all eager to join a galactic community. Alan's ship had followed at a distance, watching over the mission, just in case. Now he was the only witness to humanity's true welcome to the stars. The journey back to Earth took 14 days. 14 days for Alan to replay the destruction in his mind. 14 days to think about the message the Vraxians had sent just before they fired. Primitive species will submit or be removed. When Alan's ship landed at the United Earth Defense Headquarters in Geneva, a crowd waited. Families of the Olive Branch crew, government officials, military leaders, all hoping for good news that Alan couldn't give. General Sophia Patel met him at the landing pad. She took one look at his face and knew. "How bad?" she asked. "Total loss," Alan replied. No warning, no chance to surrender. They didn't even try to talk. The debriefing lasted hours. Alan showed the recordings again and again, the Olive Branch approaching with lights bright and weapon systems offline. The massive Vraxian ship, shaped like a blade, dark against the stars. The flash of energy weapons. The explosion. "They're at least 100 years ahead of us technologically," said Dr. Ben Miller, the chief science officer, as he studied the data. "Those energy readings, we've barely theorized weapons like that." "And they're not alone," added Alan. "From what we gathered before the attack, this hegemony includes at least 12 advanced species. The Vraxians are just the leaders." President Laura Chen sat silently through most of the meeting. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "What are our options?" The room fell quiet. It was General Patel who answered. "We have 3 choices, Madam President. We can try to contact them again and beg for mercy. We can hide and hope they forget about us. Or, prompted the President. "Or we can prepare to fight," said Alan. "Not now. We lose, but maybe in time." Dr. Miller shook his head. "They're too advanced. It would take decades, maybe centuries to catch up." "Unless," said a new voice. Everyone turned to look at Frank Mason, a quiet engineer who rarely spoke at these meetings. "Unless we don't follow their path of development. Unless we find another way." He stepped forward and activated a holographic display. "I've been working on some theories, approaches to physics that are different from anything in our current models. High risk, but if they work." As Frank explained his ideas, Alan watched the President's face. He saw the moment when despair turned to determination. "How long?" she asked when Frank finished. "With unlimited resources, 20 years for research, 30 more for building." President Chen nodded once. "You'll have what you need." She turned to the others. "This stays secret. To the public, we'll appear to accept whatever terms the hegemony offers when they inevitably return. But behind that facade, we prepare." Alan felt something he hadn't felt since watching the Olive Branch die. Hope. "Commander Burke," the President said, "I'm promoting you to captain. Your new assignment is to build and train the crews that will one day pilot our response to the hegemony." Alan stood straight. "Yes, Madam President." As the meeting ended, Alan looked again at the frozen image of the Vraxian ship. They thought humans were weak, primitive, easily crushed. They would learn how wrong they were. 50 years passed in secret work and quiet preparation. The world that the Vraxians saw when they visited Earth every 5 years was exactly what they expected to see. A primitive species struggling with basic fusion technology, barely able to reach their own moon reliably. What they didn't see were the massive shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt. What they didn't detect were the research bases buried deep beneath the surface of Mars. What they couldn't imagine was how quickly humans could learn and adapt when their survival depended on it. Admiral Susan Blackwood walked through the main production facility on Ceres, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. At 73, her hair had gone completely white, but her eyes remained sharp and focused. She had been just a lieutenant when the Olive Branch was destroyed. Now she commanded humanity's secret fleet. "Status report, Chief Mason," she said to the man walking beside her. Frank Mason, once a young engineer with wild theories, was now the head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Division. His ideas, once called impossible, had become the foundation of humanity's new technology. "The final ships in the Alpha Fleet are almost ready," he said, pointing to the massive vessels suspended in the construction base. "The quantum drive cores are stable, and the gravity weapons are testing at 98% efficiency." Susan nodded with satisfaction. "And the Vraxians suspect nothing. They believe we're still working on nuclear fusion reactors," Frank said with a small smile. "Their inspection team left Luna Base yesterday, completely convinced we're at least 3 centuries away from any technology that could threaten them." They stopped at a viewing platform overlooking the largest construction bay. Below them, workers swarmed around a ship unlike any that had come before. It was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, with a sleek design that somehow managed to look both beautiful and deadly. "The Defiance," Susan said softly. "Our flagship. She'll be ready for her first test flight next week," Frank confirmed. "We've installed the new shield system. It should be able to absorb even direct hits from Vraxian weapons." A young officer approached them, saluting sharply. "Admiral, we've received a transmission from Earth. The hegemony has sent a message. They're sending an overseer." Susan's expression hardened. "When?" "Their ship will arrive in 3 days. They're demanding new resource quotas," and the officer hesitated. "And what, Lieutenant Rogers?" Susan prompted. "And a draft of workers, sir. 5,000 humans to serve on their mining colonies." Frank's hands clenched into fists. They've never asked for people before. "It was always going to happen eventually," Susan said. "They've done the same to every species they consider inferior." She turned to Lieutenant Rogers. "Send word to Captain Reeves. The handshake needs to be ready to meet the hegemony ship when it arrives. And tell Lieutenant Phillips to prepare his team." "Yes, Admiral." After the lieutenant left, Frank and Susan continued their inspection in silence. Finally, Frank spoke. "We're not ready yet, Susan. The fleet is at 70% completion. If they discover what we're doing—" "They won't," Susan said firmly. "Olivia Reeves is our best diplomat. She'll keep them distracted. And Greg Phillips is the finest intelligence officer we have. He'll get the information we need." She stopped walking and turned to face the viewport again, looking at the hundreds of ships in various stages of construction. 50 years ago, they thought they were dealing with frightened primitives who would accept any terms to avoid destruction. And we let them believe that. We bowed our heads and said, "Yes, masters, and thank you for your guidance." Her voice grew steely. "But the time for pretending is almost over." Frank stood beside her, looking out at humanity's secret fleet. "Do you think we'll succeed?" Susan's smile was cold. "The Vraxians are about to learn something important about humans, Frank. We don't forget. And we don't forgive easily." She checked her watch. "Come on. We need to brief the assault teams. If this overseer follows typical hegemony protocol, we have a perfect opportunity to get one of our people aboard their ship." As they walked away, the lights gleamed on the hull of the Defiance, illuminating the small Earth flag painted near its bow, the only marking on an otherwise matte black surface designed to absorb rather than reflect. Hidden, patient, and deadly, just like humanity's plans for those who had underestimated them. Captain Olivia Reeves stood on the bridge of the handshake with her hands clasped behind her back. Through the main viewport, she could see the Vraxian ship approaching Earth. It was massive, at least 5 times the size of her vessel, with sharp angles that made it look like a weapon even when at rest. "Remember," Olivia said to her crew, "we are weak, respectful, and grateful for their guidance. Everyone clear?" The bridge crew nodded. They all knew their roles in this dangerous game of pretend. "Incoming transmission, Captain," said Communications Officer Jack Ward. Olivia took a deep breath. On screen, the view screen filled with the image of a Vraxian. Its scaled skin was a deep purple, and its 4 eyes blinked in an unsettling pattern. Gold markings covered its head, showing its high rank. "I am Overseer Krastal of the Galactic Hegemony," it said, its translator making the words sound flat and cold. "I bring new directives for the Earth colony." Olivia bowed her head. "We are honored by your presence, Overseer. I am Captain Reeves of the Earth vessel Handshake. We stand ready to escort you to our planet." The Vraxian made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Your escort is unnecessary. My ship could destroy your world from this distance." "Of course, Overseer," Olivia said, keeping her expression humble while her stomach churned with anger. "We merely wish to show proper respect." "Very well. You may follow us to your landing site." As the transmission ended, Olivia exchanged glances with her first officer, Commander Peter Wright. His eyes showed the same controlled fury she felt. "Status on Phillips?" she asked quietly. Peter checked his tablet. "In position. Ready to go once we're docked alongside their ship." Olivia nodded. "Let's proceed." While the handshake followed the Vraxian vessel toward Earth, a different drama was unfolding on the underside of the diplomatic ship. Lieutenant Greg Phillips and 3 other soldiers clung to the hull, wearing suits that masked their life signs and body heat. When the 2 ships docked at the Geneva spaceport, they would make their move. Greg checked his equipment one last time. His mission was simple but dangerous. Board the Vraxian ship, place tiny quantum transmitters in key areas, and download their navigational data. The information would give Earth's fleet the location of every hegemony outpost in this sector of the galaxy. The Geneva spaceport came into view, a modern facility that had been built specifically to receive hegemony visitors. As the ships began docking procedures, Greg activated his comm. "Team ready," he whispered. "Good luck," came Olivia's quiet reply through his earpiece. When the handshake locked into place beside the much larger alien vessel, Greg gave the signal. His team activated their specialized tools and began cutting through the thin gap between the 2 ships. Inside the handshake, Olivia led a small delegation to meet the Overseer. They walked slowly down the corridor to the airlock, each step precise and measured. "Remember," Olivia told her team, "keep your eyes down. Speak only when spoken to." The airlock opened to reveal Overseer Krastal with 4 guards. The aliens stood nearly 7 feet tall, their armored bodies making them look even more imposing. "Captain," the Overseer said, "take me to your leaders immediately." "Of course," Olivia replied with a bow. "They are waiting in the reception hall." As they walked through the spaceport, the Vraxians' attention was fully on the humans in front of them. They didn't notice the 4 shadows slipping from a handshake onto their own ship. Greg led his team through the alien vessel, moving silently through service tunnels and maintenance shafts. Their suits, designed based on stolen hegemony technology, made them nearly invisible to the ship's sensors. "First transmitter placed," whispered Rosa Diaz, one of Greg's team members, as she attached a device smaller than a fingernail to a major power junction. "Second placed near their communication array," added Alex Foster. They continued their work while Olivia escorted the Overseer to Earth's leaders. In the grand reception hall of the Geneva Government Center, President Sam Harris waited with his advisors. They all wore simple clothes, nothing to suggest Earth had advanced significantly in the last 50 years. The overseer entered and didn't bother with greetings. Earth will provide 5,000 workers for our mining operations on Kepler 22 bits, it announced, and double your previous resource contributions. That may be difficult, the president said cautiously. Our population is plentiful and expendable, interrupted Krastal. This is not a request. You have 3 standard cycles to prepare the first shipment of workers. Failure to comply will result in orbital bombardment of your major cities. Olivia watched the president's face carefully. Like all of them, he had trained for years to hide his true feelings from the Vraxians. We understand, he said softly. Earth will comply. The overseer seemed pleased by their submission. It had no idea that in its own ship, the humans it despised were already fighting back. Major Linda Ortiz stood at the command center of Europa Base, hidden deep beneath the icy surface of Jupiter's moon. Screens surrounded her, showing feeds from across the solar system. Some displayed the massive shipyards on Mars, others the mining operations in the asteroid belt, and one showed a live feed of the Vraxian ship currently docked at Earth. Status report, Linda said to her team. Mars shipyards at full production, replied Officer Ryan Cole. The last of the destroyer-class vessels will be complete in 7 days. Mining operations have extracted enough exotic materials for the remaining weapon systems, added Officer Natalie Kim. Delivery to assembly points is underway. Linda nodded, her expression serious. And our colonies beyond the system. A new voice answered from the doorway. Proxima Centauri reports hegemony scout ships in their sector. Linda turned to see Admiral Blackwood entering the command center. Everyone stood at attention. At ease, Susan said, walking to the central display. How close did the scouts get to our colony? They didn't detect it, Admiral, Linda explained. Our cloaking technology worked perfectly. But they're clearly expanding their patrol range. Susan frowned. They're growing suspicious. The intelligence Lieutenant Phillips gathered confirms it. The hegemony doesn't understand why Earth has been so compliant when other species resisted. She activated a holographic display showing the positions of hegemony forces. They're planning to increase their presence in our system after they collect the workers and resources. We're not going to give them any workers, are we? Asked Ryan. No, Susan said firmly. We've prepared evacuation ships with advanced holograms. The Vraxians will think they're loading human workers, but they'll actually be loading empty ships. She turned to Linda. But that's just to buy us time. How ready are we? Linda brought up a new display showing hundreds of ships positioned throughout the solar system. 87% of the fleet is combat ready. The rest could be ready within 10 days if we push the crews to round-the-clock shifts. Susan studied the display, then made her decision. Send the signal to all commanders. Operation Thunderclap begins now. Linda's eyes widened. Now. But we're not at full strength. The hegemony is getting suspicious, Susan explained. Phillips discovered they're bringing in a science vessel to conduct deep scans of our system. If they do that, they'll find everything we've built. She looked around at the team. It's now or never. Linda nodded and turned to her communications officer. Send the coded message to all stations and colonies. The storm breaks at dawn. Across the solar system, hidden bases received the message. On Mars, massive hangar doors disguised as natural terrain began to open. In the asteroid belt, ships detached from mining stations that had served as their hiding places. On the far side of the moon, a fleet of sleek destroyers powered up their engines. And beyond the solar system, in the small colony on Proxima Centauri, Commander Jason Nichols received the same message. He gathered his pilots immediately. It's time, he told them. Humanity is done hiding. The pilots, 30 men and women who had trained for years in secret, moved quickly to their ships. They had been positioned here for one reason: to strike the first blow against the hegemony. Our target is the Tau Ceti monitoring station. Jason briefed them as they prepared. It's the hegemony's eyes and ears for this entire sector. Taking it out will blind them temporarily. He checked the mission clock. We launch in 30 minutes. The station must be neutralized before the main fleet reveals itself. Back on Europa, Linda watched as signals began appearing across the system map. One by one, humanity's ships were checking in, confirming they were ready. Message from Captain Reeves. Officer Cole reported. The Vraxian Overseer is returning to its ship. Lieutenant Phillips and his team are clear. What about the data? Susan asked. Complete success, Linda confirmed. We now have the location of every hegemony outpost, fleet position, and supply line in this sector of the galaxy. Susan looked at the tactical display one more time. 50 years of preparation. 50 years of pretending to be weak while building their strength. 50 years of swallowing their pride to survive. Send the final authorization code, she ordered. All ships to battle stations. Linda typed the command into her console. Across the solar system and beyond, the captains of humanity's secret fleet received their final orders. Within hours, the galactic hegemony would learn they had made a terrible mistake in underestimating Earth. As Linda watched the first ships begin to move, she remembered something her grandmother had told her about the day the olive branch was destroyed. They thought we would bend or break. They never considered we might be a spring, compressing under pressure only to release with even greater force. That spring was about to be released, and the galaxy would never be the same. Commander Jason Nichols sat in the cockpit of his stealth fighter, leading a squadron of 30 ships toward the TAW-CD system. Their vessels were unlike anything the hegemony had ever seen. Matte black, with hulls that absorbed sensor scans instead of reflecting them. 5 minutes to target, his navigator, Lieutenant Zoe Walsh, announced. No signs they've detected us. Jason nodded. All ships maintain communication silence. Weapons hot on my mark. The hegemony monitoring station grew larger on his view screen. It was a massive structure, a central hub with 6 long arms extending outward, constantly gathering data from across dozens of star systems. Nearly 500 hegemony personnel staffed it, most of them Vraxians. They're running standard sensor sweeps, Zoe reported. Still no sign they see us. Jason activated the squadron tactical display. Each of his pilots knew their targets, power systems, communications arrays, weapon emplacements, and hangar bays. They had trained for this mission for years, running simulations based on intelligence gathered during hegemony visits to Earth. Weapons hot, Jason ordered as they passed the outer sensor perimeter. Remember, we want to disable, not destroy. Take out their ability to call for help first. 30 acknowledgement lights blinked on his display. His pilots were ready. Execute, he commanded. The human fighters accelerated toward the station, finally appearing on hegemony sensors. But by then, it was too late. The first volley of quantum-tipped missiles struck the station's communication arrays, sending fragments of metal and crystal spinning into space. The second volley disabled the main power core. The third hit the hangar bays just as hegemony defense fighters were preparing to launch. On the station, alarms blared as Vraxian officers shouted contradictory orders. They had never expected an attack here, deep in what they considered secure space. And they certainly hadn't expected an attack from humans, a species they believed barely capable of reaching their own moon. Sir, called one of Jason's pilots, they're trying to get a distress signal out through a backup system. Alpha Team, take it out, Jason ordered. 3 fighters broke formation and swooped toward a small dish on the far side of the station. Their precision fire destroyed it before the message could be sent. The battle lasted less than 15 minutes. When it ended, the hegemony monitoring station drifted powerless in space, its crew alive but unable to communicate with the rest of the Empire. Jason led his squadron in a final pass around the disabled facility. All primary targets neutralized, he confirmed. Begin Phase 2. 5 of his ships broke away, carrying boarding teams. They would dock with the station, secure key areas, and retrieve valuable intelligence before rigging the facility for self-destruction. No one would be left behind to tell what had happened here. The hegemony would only know that one of their most important outposts had suddenly gone silent. Send the confirmation code to Admiral Blackwood, Jason instructed his communications officer. Operation Thunderclap Phase 1 complete. On the Vraxian homeworld, in the Grand Chamber of the Hegemony Council, Grand Marshal Zev Koroth was receiving disturbing reports. "What do you mean, lost contact?" he demanded of the nervous communications officer. "The Ta City station never loses contact." "We've tried all frequencies, sir," the officer replied. "The station is completely silent, and 3 patrol ships in the sector have also failed to report in." Zev Koroth's scales darkened with anger. "Send a battle group to investigate immediately." And aide approached with another message. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Overseer's ship at Earth." At the same time, the Grand Marshal stood, suddenly alert to the implications. "This is coordinated." "Impossible," said Council Member Drell, whose family had controlled mining operations in that sector for generations. "The humans are primitives." The humans," interrupted Zev Koroth, "have been suspiciously cooperative for 50 years. He turned to his military advisors. "Order all available ships to converge on the Sol system. If the humans have somehow developed beyond their means, we will make an example of them." As orders went out across the hegemony fleet, no one noticed that the humans had already accessed their secure networks. Every command, every ship movement, was being monitored by Earth's intelligence officers. Back in the Ta City system, Jason received new orders from Admiral Blackwood. His squadron would not return to Proxima Centauri as planned. Instead, they would proceed to their next target, a hegemony supply depot that serviced their warships. "The main fleet has revealed itself," Jason told his pilots. "The hegemony is scrambling to respond. Our job is to keep them confused and divided until the trap is fully set." As his squadron prepared to jump to their next target, Jason allowed himself a small smile. 50 years ago, a Vraxian captain had destroyed a human ship without warning or mercy. Now, humans were finally answering back. Admiral Susan Blackwood stood on the bridge of the Defiance as it hid within the rings of Saturn. Around her, officers monitored screens showing the approach of the hegemony battle fleet. Nearly 300 alien ships had just appeared at the edge of the solar system. "They've taken the bait," Susan said quietly. Captain Dave Russell nodded beside her. "They think they're coming to crush a small rebellion. They have no idea what's waiting for them." The hegemony fleet moved with confidence, spreading out in a standard attack formation. Their sensors showed only a handful of small Earth ships near the planet, exactly what they expected to find. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Communications Officer Lisa Jones. "Operation Saturn's net is in position." Susan studied the tactical display once more. 250 human ships waited, hidden throughout Saturn's rings and moons. Some were cloaked by advanced technology. Others simply hid behind large chunks of ice and rock. All were ready to spring the trap. "Send to all ships," Susan ordered. "Execute on my mark." Mark. Across the Saturnian system, humanity's fleet powered up engines and weapons systems. On the Defiance, Captain Russell gave the order to move out of hiding. The Vraxian commander of the hegemony fleet, Admiral Kresh, was the first to notice something was wrong. Where there had been only empty space moments before, now his sensors showed dozens, then hundreds of ships emerging from Saturn's rings. "What is this?" he demanded of his sensor officer. "Unknown vessels, Admiral," the officer replied, his scales paling with fear. They appear to be human in design." "Impossible," Kresh snapped. "Humans don't have this technology." But the evidence was right in front of him. The human ships were unlike anything in hegemony records, sleek, powerful, and bristling with weapons that his sensors couldn't even identify. "The lead human vessel is hailing us," reported his communications officer. "Put it through," Kresh ordered, composing himself. The view screen activated to show Admiral Blackwood. This is Admiral Susan Blackwood of the Earth Defense Force. Your fleet has entered restricted space. You will power down your weapons and withdraw immediately, or we will open fire. Kresh stared in disbelief. A human, giving orders to the hegemony. It was unthinkable. You are in no position to make demands, he replied. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. Your primitive species will submit or be destroyed. Susan's expression didn't change. I was hoping you'd say that. She ended the transmission and turned to Captain Russell. All ships, engage according to Battle Plan Alpha. The human fleet moved with surprising speed and coordination. Instead of forming a traditional line of battle, they broke into smaller squadrons that attacked from multiple directions at once. Captain Russell led the Defiance directly toward the hegemony flagship. Quantum weapons ready, he reported. Target locked. Fire, Susan ordered. The Defiance released a burst of energy unlike anything the hegemony had ever encountered. It bypassed the alien vessel's shields completely, disrupting its power systems without destroying the ship. Throughout the Saturn system, similar scenes played out. Human vessels darted between the larger, slower hegemony ships, firing precision shots that disabled rather than destroyed. They're trying to regroup, reported Tactical Officer Ben Martinez, forming a defensive sphere around their command ships. Susan smiled slightly. Just as we predicted. Signal the Titan squadrons. From the surface of Saturn's largest moon, 30 more ships suddenly launched. They had been hidden there for years, waiting for this moment. Admiral Kresh watched in horror as his carefully organized fleet fell into chaos. Human ships seemed to be everywhere at once, firing weapons that his shields couldn't stop and moving in patterns his tactical computers couldn't predict. Status report, he demanded. 47 ships disabled. His second-in-command reported, voice shaking. Another 32 reporting critical damage. We've lost contact with the entire Eastern Battle Group. Return fire. Destroy them, Kresh ordered. But the human ships moved too quickly, evading the hegemony's energy weapons. When hegemony shots did connect, they seemed to do little damage against the human vessel's advanced shields. On the Defiance, Susan watched the battle unfold exactly as planned. 50 years of studying hegemony tactics had prepared them well. Their flagship is attempting to retreat, Captain Russell reported. Not today, Susan said firmly. Target their engines. The Defiance fired again, and the massive hegemony flagship drifted to a stop, its engines dark. After 3 hours of battle, it was over. More than half the hegemony fleet had been disabled. The rest had fled, jumping away to safety. Susan looked at the tactical display, showing the defeated hegemony ships. Send boarding parties to the command vessels. I want their navigation data and any intelligence we can gather. As the human fleet secured their victory, Admiral Kresh was brought to the Defiance as a prisoner. When he saw the ship's interior, the advanced technology, the confident human crew, he finally understood. You were never primitive, he said to Susan. She looked at him coldly. No, we just let you think we were. That was your first mistake. Your second was destroying the olive branch 50 years ago. For the first time in millennia, the hegemony had been defeated in battle, and the galaxy was about to learn that humans were not to be underestimated again. Lieutenant Kate Winters stepped off her shuttle onto the dusty surface of Kepler 22 bits. The mining world was one of dozens that the hegemony had stripped of resources over the centuries. Its native population, the blue-skinned Andorians, had been forced to work in their own mines for generations. Kate looked up at the 3 suns in the sky, then back to the group of aliens waiting for her. 6 different species stood together. Andorians, Tellarites with their thick fur and tusks, reptilian saurians, crystalline folians, and 2 others she didn't recognize. I am Kate Winters, representing Earth and humanity, she said, raising her hand in greeting. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. The tallest Andorian stepped forward. I am Shorin, leader of the resistance on this world. We have heard rumors that humans have done the impossible, defeated hegemony warships in battle. It's not just rumors, Kate confirmed. 2 days ago, our fleet disabled most of a hegemony battle group near our homeworld. She activated a small device that projected images of the Battle of Saturn's Rings, and that was just the beginning. The aliens watched in stunned silence as the hologram showed human ships outmaneuvering and disabling the much larger Vraxian vessels. How? Asked a Tellarate named Grau. The hegemony has ruled for thousands of years. No one has challenged them successfully in living memory. Kate smiled. They thought we were weak because we were patient. They thought we were primitive because we hid our advancements. Most importantly, they never imagined we would share our technology rather than use it to dominate others. She pressed another button on her device, and a new hologram appeared showing technical schematics for weapons, shields, and engines. Earth is offering an alliance, Kate continued. We will provide technology and training to help you defend your worlds. In return, we ask for your knowledge of hegemony territory and assistance in finding other species who might join us. The aliens exchanged glances, centuries of oppression making them cautious. Why should we trust humans? Asked a Saurian with green scales. How do we know you won't become our new masters once the Vraxians are defeated? It was a fair question. Kate had been prepared for it. Because unlike the hegemony, we're giving you a choice, she replied. You can accept our help or not. You can join our alliance or remain neutral. What we won't do is force you to serve us or threaten to destroy your worlds if you refuse. She gestured to her shuttle, where engineer Paul Ramirez was unloading crates of equipment. These are shield generators that can protect your main settlement from orbital bombardment, Kate explained. They're yours regardless of your decision. Consider it proof of our intentions. Shorin looked skeptical. The Vraxians will retaliate when they discover these. They're already too busy to worry about a single mining colony, Kate said. Human forces are striking hegemony outposts across 3 sectors. Their empire is beginning to crumble. As Paul activated the shield generator, a shimmering dome of energy formed over the settlement. The gathered aliens stared in amazement at protection they never thought possible. What do you call this alliance? Asked Grau. The Stellar Coalition, Kate answered. Equal partners united against oppression. While Kate continued discussions with the alien leaders, Paul worked with local engineers to install more equipment. He showed them how the technology worked, answering questions and teaching them to maintain it themselves. Your people learn quickly, Paul told a young Andorian engineer named Thala. This would have taken days to explain to most humans. Thala's antenna twitched with pride. We've had to adapt to survive. The hegemony changes our quotas and equipment constantly to keep us struggling. Paul shook his head in disgust. That ends now. By nightfall, 7 new defense systems were operating across the settlement. More importantly, representatives from all 6 species had agreed to join the coalition. Kate sent a message back to Admiral Blackwood. First diplomatic mission successful. 6 species committed to the alliance, requesting additional teams for training and equipment distribution. As she prepared to leave for the next world on her list, Shorin approached her one last time. For generations, my people have told stories about the day freedom would come, he said. None of us expected it would be brought by a species younger than our recorded history. Kate smiled. The Vraxians made a critical mistake. They thought age brings strength. They forgot that youth brings innovation and the courage to challenge the established order. Across the sector, similar meetings were taking place as human diplomats and engineers reached out to worlds long oppressed by the hegemony. The Stellar Coalition was growing, one planet at a time. And on each world, the news spread. Humanity had arrived, and everything was about to change. 6 months after the Battle of Saturn's Rings, the massive Earth dreadnought Reckoning hung in orbit above the Vraxian homeworld. Its dark hull reflected no light, making it appear like a hole in space itself. Behind it, a fleet of over 500 ships from 24 different species formed a blockade around the planet. Fleet Admiral Alan Burke stood at the viewport, looking down at the world that had once seemed untouchable. After 50 years, he had come full circle from witnessing the destruction of the olive branch to leading the final confrontation with those responsible. "The Hegemony Council is ready to receive us," said Captain Olivia Reeves, now his second in command. Alan nodded. "Let's not keep them waiting." Their shuttle descended through the atmosphere to the capital city. Unlike human cities with their varied architecture, the Vraxian capital was built to intimidate, all sharp angles and towering structures that loomed over narrow streets. The Grand Council chamber was at the center, a massive building topped with a crystalline dome. Inside, the 7 members of the Hegemony Council waited on elevated platforms, looking down at the floor where the human delegation would stand. Alan stepped into the chamber with Olivia and Ambassador Eric Donovan beside him. Representatives from the other coalition species followed them. Andorians, Tellarites, Saurians, and many others who had suffered under Vraxian rule. "You stand before the Grand Council of the Galactic Hegemony," announced a Vraxian official. "State your purpose." Ambassador Donovan stepped forward. At 68, he had been a young diplomat when the olive branch was destroyed. His entire career had been building to this moment. "We are here to accept your surrender," he said simply. Murmurs rippled through the Vraxian officials gathered along the walls. The council members' scales darkened with anger. "Surrender," hissed council leader Drav Korath. "The hegemony does not surrender. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years." "Your rule is over," Alan replied. "Your fleets have been defeated. Your subject worlds have risen against you. You have already lost more than half your territory." He activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Areas in red, still under hegemony control, were surrounded by blue regions that had joined the coalition. "Even now," Olivia added, "your last major fleet is engaged at Rigel. They will not win." As if to confirm her words, a message came through to Alan's comm unit. He listened briefly, then looked up at the council. "The Rigel fleet has surrendered," he announced. "There are no more hegemony forces capable of significant resistance." The council members conferred hurriedly among themselves. Finally, Drav Korath spoke again. "What are your terms?" Eric Donovan produced a document. "The dissolution of the hegemony. All subject worlds to be granted independence, war reparations to be paid to those planets most damaged by your rule, and the Vraxian people to be confined to their home system for a period of 50 years. 1 year for each year the humanity prepared for this day." "And if we refuse?" asked a female council member. Alan gestured upward, where they all knew the reckoning waited in orbit. "Then my orders are to reduce this city to ash, after evacuating the civilian population." It was not an idle threat. The Reckoning's weapons could easily destroy the capital while leaving the rest of the planet untouched. The council knew it. "We will sign your terms," Drav Korath said bitterly. 3 days later, representatives from 100 formerly subjugated species gathered on the neutral world of Terra Nova, Earth's first official colony, to form the new Galactic Congress. Unlike the Hegemony Council chamber, the meeting hall was circular, with all seats at the same level. Olivia watched from the sidelines as Ambassador Donovan took his place as Earth's representative. There would be no special status for humans in this new government, no privileged position despite their role in defeating the hegemony. That had been Earth's decision from the beginning. "It's strange," said a voice beside her. She turned to see Alan, now wearing civilian clothes for the first time in decades. "What is?" she asked. "We spent 50 years preparing for war. Now we have to learn how to build a peace." Olivia smiled. "We've always been better at building than destroying." On the last day of the Congress, a Vraxian diplomatic ship arrived, the first peaceful contact between their species and the rest of the galaxy. When the Vraxian ambassador entered the chamber, many representatives tensed, generations of fear not easily forgotten. Captain Olivia Reeves met him at the entrance. She had been chosen specifically for this moment, to close the circle that had begun with destruction. "Ambassador Krelnar," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome to the first truly peaceful meeting between our peoples." The Vrakshin looked at her hand uncertainly, then slowly reached out his own. "The first of many, we hope." As Olivia led him into the chamber, Alan watched from a balcony above. He thought of all those lost on the olive branch, and the many others who had died never seeing this day. They had prepared for revenge, but achieved something better. A new beginning for the galaxy. "We did it," he whispered to those long-gone colleagues. "We showed them who humans really are. Not conquerors, not victims, but builders of a better future for all."